I consider the scene to be at least partially jacked. Ask yourself, and we need to ask ourselves as a nation in general and as humanity on a whole, what do we expect from ourselves? What do we expect from each other? Because for us to get out of this situation, some serious discipline needs to take place. And unfortunately, it seems like discipline has always been the struggle of humanity, has always been the struggle of mankind. 19 arrested within the first 2 days of the SOE, complete with a whole set of insane stories to go along with some of these arrests. The excuses used, who said they were kicked out by their girlfriend, which pastor, which apostle, and his group is deciding to go on the promenade, and in one breath, they're praying for the nation to be healed from COVID.
Send the people away! Corona must stop in Trinidad and Tobago!
Hey guys, back to the showroom.
And in the next breath, they're bringing down COVID curses on top of people's head and wishing death on others. It's certainly been a rocky start and a bumpy start, and it doesn't give for much hope of us getting cleanly out of this SOE and out of the pandemic in the long run. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has revealed that 19 people have been arrested in the first 2 days of the state of emergency for breaking the 9 p.m. curfew. Hey, wait! If you're watching it and you like it, don't forget to click that like button, drop a comment. It increases the engagement on the video, which would allow it to be seen by more people, and YouTube would allow my tiny channel to be shared to more people. And if you find that this content is great and you'd like to see more people watching this, and some people have told me, boy, I surprised you reached 7,000 followers yet. Well, if you'd like to see that happen, share the video, share it to people that you think would like to see, share it to people who may not even like to see it because they don't know that they want to see it yet. Maybe. Subscribe to see when the new videos are coming. I'm making videos talking about current events, talking about politics, talking about news, talking about regional happenings, global happenings, and how they affect us all. If you're interested in hearing about these things and whatever other interesting things my mind conjures up or I contemplate on, feel free to click that notification bell and see when new videos come out. For our reading convenience, they put it all in a nice table, and we could clearly see that if we have to put the blame on one side, on one group, Tobago dragging the flag. But then again, Tobago case is not that high, so they could say we drag the flag in terms of allowing our infections to balloon in the first place. Notably missing from the list is the Southland, and big up to the Southland responsible people living down south, and they had a bad showing previously with the whole theatrics and the promenade, and I think this may be some redemption for them. Take a clap to the Southland. Well done. And they really needed that redemption because the apostle who brought his flock out to pray for the nation on the promenade, he's still making news, and he's out here saying that he has no regrets. Speaking to Guardian Media, he was asked whether he had any regrets for breaking the law. No regrets, no apology, neither. I only fear God, he said. Okay, to try and bring reason to an unreasonable person is an exercise in frustration. And I'm not sure as a country what we are going to do. And I don't like the idea necessarily of trying to force people into a way. But if as a country it seems like some people are unreasonable and they have no interest in even bringing up discussions to attempt to bring themselves into some reasonable stance and allow for compromise in some instance, then what are we to do as a country? And speaking of reasons, it seemed like people didn't have good enough ones to get their curfew passes and to get their curfew exemptions when they wrote to our Commissioner of Police, the ever-present Gary Griffith. Double G. Hours after Commissioner of Police Gary Griffith held a news conference where he said he was amazed to see that 250,000 names were given by 2,800 organizations to have curfew passes issued. That figure skyrocketed to 350,000 applicants, with close to 7,000 letters coming from companies requesting exemptions. However, Commissioner Griffith said late yesterday evening, only 8,000 curfew passes were granted from that mammoth figure, as the purpose of this current state of emergency is to limit the movement of people. Later on, we learned that the final number of curfew permits that were granted, that were complete, were 10,000, and 350,000 of them were rejected. Gary Griffith is not playing. He is saying we require a change of attitude. And you think that with these special circumstances going on, and with all this increased police activity in the country, that certain people's behavior would change. But no, a drunk driver was caught outside after curfew. Now, can someone explain this to me? You're drunk, you're driving after the curfew hours. I don't understand what would be going on in your mind. Like, how did you expect to get away with this? What was the game plan? And I assume you went to wherever you went to and you got drunk there and now you're heading home. When you went to where you went to, didn't you think that, okay, maybe when I get drunk, I'd have to drive? And did you assume that, with a state of emergency now ongoing and police with heightened authority and increased vigilance on the street, that somehow I am going to be driving drunk and make it safely home without being caught? Well, in the grand scheme of things, I guess it was a good thing that he was caught by the police and he didn't cause an accident and harm other people or even himself. Of course, not to be outdone by the regular citizenry, ex-health minister, yes, a former health minister of our country, he was expressing how upset he was with the citizens for going and getting tested. Okay, well, part of what he was upset about was the panic testing. For a lot of the citizens going out and getting tested in a panic, and I agree in terms of discouraging panic. At no time in no emergency is panic recommended. But apparently it wasn't just the panic that the minister was upset about, because what he was trying to point out was that by the population going to get tested, by the population panicking and going to get all these tests, we're increasing our infection rates. And by increasing our infection rates, we're causing the government to make drastic measures such as the state of emergency. Now, I may have some critiques and criticisms for the state of emergency, and I'm sure many other people do. But my criticism for the state of emergency isn't that we're doing it falsely because people are getting tested too much and that we're seeing too many positive cases because people are getting tested too much. I believe, personally, I think what scared most people were the amounts of deaths, not the amounts of positive cases. Okay, the amounts of positive cases can skyrocket, but if the deaths remain at zero, I'm quite sure a lot of people would have been much more fearless than they are, but we are seeing people dying. And when people see people dying, they tend to get serious and they tend to expect more serious measures to be put in place. And I'm sorry to break it to the former health minister, but I think whether people got tested or not, the amount of deaths would have remained the same. The testing didn't increase the number of deaths. The amount of deaths is increasing or staying high because the amount of COVID cases is already high. Over on the side of the world, our former health ministers are on social media encouraging this unique behavior, while in Ukraine, they're firing their health minister because his vaccination program they found too slow. His own cabinet fired him because they found his vaccination program too slow. Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal held Health Minister Maxim Stepanov responsible for the failure to quickly procure more vaccines. Stepanov argued in his defense that the ex-Soviet nation has faced tough competition as nations try to procure vaccines amid the pandemic. Oddly enough, that's the same excuse or the same reason given by our government and our politicians as to why we can't procure more vaccines. And according to what Global News says, it seems to be true. But it seems like that excuse didn't work for him and he got fired for it. Maybe we can see if we can get some vaccines from Antigua, who are currently having some struggle trying to get their population to take these vaccines, and they may have to look to donate it to someone else if their population isn't taking it. Because remember, these vaccines do expire. So when we have citizens, when we have a country that has a stock of vaccines and their population doesn't take it within a certain time, it would make more sense for them to donate. It would make more sense for them to donate it to a country that may in fact actually use it and want it than just to leave it there to spoil. St. Vincent was struggling with a similar problem before, and now it seems like Antigua is sharing this problem. Antiguans are refusing to take the vaccines, and their government has responded by stocking up in $500,000 worth of oxygen they sourced from the United States of America. They said that the reason they sourced it was news coming out from India that cautioned, and other countries that cautioned about dwindling oxygen supplies. And the fact is, it's not just the oxygen supplies that are dwindling. The whole world is seeing dwindling of various stocks, dwindling of various resources. The world economy is suddenly running low on everything. This has been a headline. This headline made the rounds on Monday, but it isn't something new. It's been tracked, and it has been tracked for quite some time, since the pandemic began, and primarily since the lockdowns began somewhere mid last year. coming down straight through to the beginning of this year, a lot of the stocks, a lot of the prices on goods skyrocketed because the supply for them just dwindled that much. A year ago, as the pandemic ravaged country after country and economies shuddered, consumers were the ones panic buying. Today, on the rebound, it's companies furiously trying to stock up. Mattress producers to car manufacturers to aluminum foil makers are buying more material than they need to survive the breakneck speed at which demand for goods is recovering and assuage the primal fear of running out. The frenzy is pushing supply chains to the brink of seizing up, shortages, transportation bottlenecks, and price spikes are nearing the highest levels in recent memory, raising concern that a supercharged global economy will stoke inflation. The article puts inflation at the foot of the consumers as the pandemic is lifting, as some of the lockdowns are lifting, as economies are slowly churning back into motion. The demand on some of the goods that is coming out now, because bear in mind, coming out of such a lockdown, the demand on many goods would be skyrocketing. The demand on building goods may skyrocket. The demand on any industry that was latent for a while and is now trying to recover would skyrocket. And as the demand outstrips the supply, we have the cost rising. But I've seen another argument in it where some people speak about the amount of money that the large nations are printing, with the US printing something like a third of their money supply was printed last year. That's a lot of money, and by them printing that amount of money, the amount of cash in the system actually balloons, and that may be driving some inflation. That's one reason that I'm hearing. Now, if it's true that the demand and supply is part of the reason, then I think that the excess money printing is just going to exacerbate that, and it's going to lead for some really sticky situations coming out of the pandemic and coming out of the lockdowns. A nice metric to use to see just how much prices are changing and just how much inflation is going crazy, we can see that the lumber prices have more than doubled over the past year. So the price for the same piece of lumber last year, a year ago, is now 2 times that. So if you were to pay $100 for some piece of lumber last year, it's double that now. Now, what that actually does is, if you had $100 last year, it has actually halved in value when compared to this year, at least if you're thinking about purchasing lumber. And what that is doing is slowing down the building industry, at least in the US. And what we can expect as smaller nations and as islands within our regional area, being close to the US, and a lot of our economies are pinned to the US and are very dependent on what goes on in the US. There's this saying that the US sneezes and the Caribbean catches the cold. And there is some truth to that, even beside cultural issues. There's a lot of truth to that even in economic issues. And when we're looking at the US and seeing this ballooning in lumber prices, this ballooning in inflation as a whole, and we're now going into a new phase of lockdowns, we're now going into a new state of emergency, that leaves some serious challenges for us when we're looking on the other side of it, because I believe almost surely some of this is going to come down to us. And it's not just the lumber prices. We're seeing that the steel prices also are skyrocketing. And if you put some thought to it, steel and lumber are instrumental in construction. And a lot of what drives our economy and many other economies in the world has to do with construction. And when the prices of lumber and steel raise to that unsustainable level, chances are what is going to happen with the construction industry is it's going to have to pause. To buy the material to build something now may cost you 3 times the amount it would have cost you a year ago. Inflation hits really hard on middle income and on the lower income levels, because a lot of your resources are in liquid cash. A lot of the resources that people in middle and lower income people use would just be in cash. You use cash, you go buy something and you get this thing. And what happens is your cash loses value. So even if you have the same $10,000 that you had at some other point in time, if inflation hits, your $10,000 could be worth less now. So as we think about how we want to donkey the scene down in Trinidad and how much we want to play around with our future, it makes sense to bear in mind that it's not just the health consequences we have to face. Yes, we don't want to overburden our health services, and if we overburden our health services, it's going to create for chaos in our country, and that's a whole other thing. But we also need to look at the economic consequences that we can see obviously seem to be coming down the road. And the worse we make our current situation, the longer it takes us to rebound and to get back into a place where we can be in full economic flight, the harder it's going to be for us to catch up. And when things get hard, it's oftentimes the smaller man, the smaller people, the poorer people that suffer the most from this. Think about it, and see you in the next video.
and you feel the music, rising with the tide.